America is faced with her worst domestic crisis since the Civil War, or since the Revolutionary War. For America now faces a race war.
Everybody, my name is Bill Murray. We'd like to welcome everyone to the B.K. Mackey's History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of Amos Wilson, Bill Mackey Jr., Alton Maddox, Brother Saul, Louis Ray Rivera, Elhaj Malik Al-Shabazz, Minister Khaled, Neil Noble, Renobo Rashidi, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, and all the historians, Ivan Van Sertima, Mr. Tyson, Brother Harold. We meet here in honor Miss Leola Maddox, Alton, and in honor of Miss Leola and all the work that the members of the United African Movement, through all the years of bringing lectures and having people together, we never want to forget Miss Leola. And she had a moderately old car, not a new one, moderately old, and she drove all the way from Teaneck because she believed, and she would eat her dinner at the UAM, because she believed in bringing people together, bringing them out, having conversations, and having a speaker. And for all her unrelenting work, we never want to forget Leola for doing the work. So for the people that's here, that came out in the rain, drizzling in New York, but they still came out in the rain because they want to support the Mackey's History Club, no matter what. So the speaker could put his lecture on social media, and hopefully they will never take it off. So we meet here every other Wednesday. So I want to give everybody a great big hand for coming out. I also want to thank our Zoom audience for logging in, because there's many other things that you could be doing, but you choose to log on to get a little information and support our speaker, Dr. Fred Monderson. So we want to thank you. So I'm going to mention some books. You can get these books readily available. Oh, we're going to bring the camera over to the Amos collection. This is to help Zimbabwe and African World Info Systems, to help Zimbabwe continue the great work of Amos Wilson, because he goes beyond the call of duty. We have Blueprint for Black Power, zoom in. We have Blueprint for Black Power. We also have Black on Black Violence, the psychodynamics of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. We have Zimbabwe's latest in honor of Amos, the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward a reclamation of the African mind. And whether we know it or not, family, all our minds need to be reclaimed. A reclamation of the African mind. We have to be reprogrammed, and it's going to take a long time. But it's starting little by little. Amos's classic, Awakening the Genius of Black Children, the falsification of African consciousness. And we have a lot of false things out here. Issues of manhood in black and white, and we have a lot of problems with issues of manhood in this 25th century. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order, in honor of Louis Ray Rivera, Gaz in jail, and S.K. Damian El-Krouam, Distorted Truths, the Bastardization of African Cosmology. So we have these books to help Zimbabwe to continue the work of Amos. We can bring some good reads. So we try our best to support them. Buy the books and buy more. So I'm going to have some books. You can get these on Amazon, they're never going to stop selling books, family. Let's get that straight. You're always going to be able to buy a book, no matter who tries to ban it and all that, this and that. No, the book will be readily available. If you search for it, you can find it and you can read it. So, in honor of Louis Ray Rivera, who came to the Mackey's group, and when Mackey passed away, and we always had trouble getting speakers, getting somebody to come down and speak at the Mackey's group, Louis Ray Rivera took up arms, and he would come down, and he would speak. And me, Hassan, Brother Colvin, and the few members that wanted to continue the work of Mackey, we would come down here and we had better things to do, but we still, and that's one of the great reasons of this lectures. We had plenty of things to do. We could have let it go on and let it die when Mackey left us. But we didn't. We wanted to bring more information and bring people together. So Louis Ray would come down and he would speak and he would talk for hours, very, very small. And we would walk him home, and we're on Quincy Street. And Louis Ray lived on Jefferson Avenue. And when we would leave here, we would walk him home, which is only 4 or 5 blocks. And Louis Ray would speak for another hour and a half. He was Bed-Stuy all the way, Marcy Project. And after talking, I found out he knew my whole family, my older brothers and sisters. So we want to thank Louis Ray, and this book is in honor of him, Jazz and Jail. And that's one of the things about lectures. A lot of groups fell off after the main focus person of the group transpired. You know, you had the place out in Queens. Forgot the guy's name, but it didn't come. But I have some books. We have, in honor of Dr. Ben, the African Poetry Theater. We had the African Poetry Theater, and when what's the name passed away, they just couldn't bring it together. We had the United African Movement. And when that dissolved, we tried to keep, and this is what the main reasons of Mackey, is to still try to bring people together to hear a lecture, to talk. So we continue the Mackey's group. Only thing different now, the lecture can be put on YouTube. It can be put on Rumble. It can be put on Big Shoot. When before they didn't have that, you had to buy the DVD and study the DVD. So we have Dr. Ben, Black Man of the Now. Dr. Ben, may he rest in peace, went beyond the call of duty and went back into the land of the black. It shows you the pyramids and how the different builders and how they just did all the glamorous work. And here in this 2025, we're paying Asians to build statues. We were the great builders of the world. So we want to honor Dr. Ben. Also, the Unspoken Alliance, Israel's Secret Pact with apartheid South Africa. And this book tells you who really controls that southern part of Africa. And we want to thank this book right here. In honor of Cynthia McKinney, and in my personal opinion, the only person that cared about the people of Georgia, and she was run out of town by Negroes on orders from white folk. And Cynthia McKinney, when you hear people like Donald Trump mention S-hole countries and how these countries are doing so bad, well, you can say what he said means one thing, but you have to read the book, because she wrote a book, How the United States Creates S-hole Countries. So instead of making a statement toward him saying that, it's this country that created the situation where the country is called S-hole countries. But it's funny, if it's an S-hole country, How come you need the sugar cane? How come you need the mangoes? How come you need the pineapple? How come you need the gold? How come you need all the natural resources coming out of these countries? Brazil, Africa, South America. And you got the nerve to call it S-hole countries? But the European world depends on the ingredients coming out of these countries. Also, when China sneezes from the coronavirus lockdown to the global political economic, and let me tell you, Cynthia McKinney has went where no person has gone with this book. It's a large read, and I'm not finished yet, but let me tell you, she lays it down, and it's just sad that what happened to her. So in honor of the great sister Cynthia McKinney, if you get this book and read it, you're going to find some stuff out. Okay. Everywhere we look, family, we see medical marijuana. We see whites open up cannabis shops. We see Arabs all over in the black community selling weed. They all over the place. You see people walking around, they selling it, they smoking it. Police cannot do nothing about it. They smoking it in front of their face. They reading it. They doing everything. They waiting in front of the place. They doing all that. So when you look into this book by Lyndon LaRouche, it tells you who's the man behind this medical marijuana, and it's destroying. The only thing that the Democratic Party has given us in the youth is weed. And you have heard the mayor states, this thing is working because I smell weed. It's one of the most disgusting policies that the city councils voted on. Everybody is smoking it. White people is in the hood smoking it. Blacks, the youth is smoking it. Everybody is smoking this medical marijuana. And it's disgusting. They're not even looking for something to eat after they eat. After they smoke it, they used to get hungry and start laughing. Now they ain't laughing and they ain't hungry. This is a blockbuster book. The Man Behind the Curtain, The Secret Network of George Soros. And when you read this book right here, it'll tell you everything that this man controls. And if you go into this other book, it says the unauthorized biography, the live times and trading secrets of the world's greatest investor. And it tells you, his people in the financial world show you and tell you they have written about the dastardly things that George Soros has done, how he created his millions and funds the Democratic Party. It's another book that I don't have with me, but it's basically called How George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and the Democratic Party has took complete control of the Democratic Party, 60s radicals. So if you read about George Soros and meet some other people, his son Alex, Hoffman, Bloomberg, and if you read about these individuals, you can see who's being controlled. So these are great books, but keep your eye on Soros. The Manufacturing of a President, the CIA's insertion of Barack Hussein Obama. This is just one publication on Barry Santoro. And if you read this book, and they got two other books, Dexter Hartley, it'll tell you on how this individual came to part in America. Read about these people. We want to thank you. Also, you hear a lot of things. The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Chancellor tells you the mistakes we made in Africa on how it was so easily, after all thousands of years, that the Portuguese was able to slip into foreign dynasties when individuals was weak. But Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization, basically will show you the mistakes we made from great dynasties to being conquered by the Arabs, enslaved by the Arabs. It talks about the Moors, and then the Arab slave trade of the African. Also, then you come into the European slave trade of the African. Not the transatlantic slave trade, the European. So Dr. Chancellor Williams' excellent book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. Queen Nzinga, African warrior, and most of our sisters would read about Queen Nzinga and how she went head to head with the Portuguese in negotiation and they was unable to take control of the area. You wouldn't let these cats run around and disrespect you and dog you out, because when you see how smoking this sister was, they couldn't pull the wool over you. So I want to tell all the sisters, read about Queen Nzinga and you'll really know how to stand up for yourself. Reparations is a big thing now, but it's not global. And you got some people from outside of the United States got the nerve to sit up there and go to these phony committees and say that the African American, the FBAs are not entitled to anything. Well, let me explain something to you. Slavery happened all over the world. We was dropped all over in Brazil, South America, Mexico, everywhere. So this book, African Slavery in Latin America and the Caribbean, you get this book and you read it, and you talk about slavery from where you came from before you came here, before you make some kind of idiotic statement about reparations. Also, African or American Black Identity Crisis in New York City, 1784 to 1861, and those were some hard times. At one time, they was hanging us from the lampposts on 42nd Street and 6th Avenue in the Black Children's Orphanage, Seneca Village, upstate in Washington Heights. Black folks lived there. So a lot of people want to claim some dues, but they ain't paying no damn dues. These books talk about things that's happening. Nobody never brings out this book without sanctuary. And it has the pictures of the hangings in America. It has the pictures of the barbecues. Hanging in Mississippi, hanging in Florida, in Jacksonville. Then when you get to Africa, you look at the Cecil Rhodes, where a lot of blacks go to these schools and they are Rhodes Scholars. And you don't talk about getting compensation. When they cut your arms off, they tied a horse in the South from one hand of a woman to the other hand, and they told the horse to run until the woman was snapped in half and the baby came out. And you got the nerve to run your mouth about, no, you shouldn't get this. Look at this. Just look at it. Just look at it. In every committee, you hear some nonsense. Look at these pictures. Hangings, whippings, getting thrown in boiling hot water, getting whooped. And every time I hear some nonsense in the committee, where Sister Keisha and them go to, some fool is running their mouth. In honor of Tyree Wright, everybody thinks Booker T. Washington was some kind of sellout. Booker T. Washington was a bad man, according to Sister Tyree Wright. And we have her book, he was on the money. So I want to thank Tyree Wright with this book, The Makings of a Pan-African. Now, in honor of Io Kamati, the irritated genie, in his 1-2 punch, Jews Are the Problem, Part 1, and his second, Jews Are the Problem, The Psychology of the Jew. And it gets into, I got both one, but the second book is The Psychology of the Jew. And it gets into these high profile and how they took control and just start doing stuff that was deadly. So we're going to thank Io. Okay, we're going to go into some books. CO19 is not going. They're trying to run it back. We have Capitalism on the Ventilator. Told you about all the money they made. Please read about the dastardly deeds of Dr. Anthony Fauci. And this is, Cynthia McKinney basically states, they are basically taking people out and nobody's complaining about it. This plan is diabolical, so they're not banning these books. The real Anthony Fauci. I mean, I can't understand how people are not even complaining about these thousands of funerals we're going to. Deception, the Great CO, Rand Paul. It's another book. In honor of Dr. Scott Whitaker, our good friend out of Detroit, out of Atlanta. Medicine, the causes and solutions in malnutrition that are killing the world. This book is excellent. We have this book, and you can also get this book on Amazon. All you got to do is Google it. Read it. Dr. Scott is a bad guy, and we want to definitely honor him by purchasing this book. I want to thank Robert Kennedy and what he's doing as the head with all these books written by Children's Health Defense. You get into it, you read it, you take what you need, the rest you leave it alone. Down the CO rabbit hole. The Wuhan cover-up. Terrifying bioweapons arms race. I'm reading this book right now, The American Medical Killing Machine. And when you read this book, it tells you what goes on in medicine. But see, we're lucky. Not only do we read this book, we have Dr. Arthur Lewis here. So we get a 1-2 punch. We get the real deal. But I'm reading this book and I'm seeing stuff that they do, and it's documented by doctors that actually put their medical license on the line by putting information on what goes on with these big pharmaceutical companies and how they use us. This is an excellent book. Vax versus unvax. Let the science speak. The Ultimate Vaccine Timeline. I want to thank Children's Health Defense and Pierre Corey. It tells you about the history of vaccines. It goes all the way to 1914, 1884. It goes all the way up. It tells you everything about a vaccine that you should know, the company, how they make it, how they started creating it, how they inject it. This vaccine timeline is excellent read. The Pfizer papers. I want to thank these individuals, Amy Kelly, for taking Pfizer through the Freedom of Information Act. And Pfizer did not want to bring this book out. Now, it's a lot of reading, and Pfizer didn't want to bring it out. They wanted to wait 75 years. And the people were leaving us now in droves. But they forced the Pfizer papers, and they had to come out with it. And they also getting ready to come out with another publication called the Moderna papers, and the Johnson & Johnson papers, and the AstraZeneca papers. So these big multi-million-dollar companies, you know, Moderna never made a vaccine in their life. So we want to thank for forcing them, because they didn't want to let the public know what they was doing. And at least you could get a chance and buy the book and study it for years and years. Edward Down, Causes Unknown, The Epidemic of Sudden Death, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 2019, where it talks about the young football players, the young athletes, people in the prime of their life, collapsing. I'm hearing now where people, loved ones, are waking up gone, unresponsive. So these are young athletes in the prime of their life, gone. Just gone. So ain't nobody banning these books. Jeff Bezos ain't banning these books. The books are there, but you have to read it. You take what you need, the rest you leave it, and you don't worry about it. At least you got the information, because they're coming again. And I don't know what's going to happen, but it ain't going to be good. But at least you'll know what's going on. So these are some community programs and community events that we have that you can log on in the spare time. See, while everybody's partying, you're supposed to be getting information. But like always, they just want you to party and bullshit. Thorough Black Talk, the hottest show on the East Coast, with Sister Brooke, Tad, Keisha, Brother Black. They have an excellent program on Thursdays on Facebook. Thorough Black Talk. That program, very good. So we want to thank the Thorough Black Talk family and Sister Keisha, Tad, Brother Black, Sister Brooke, and everybody. And also, Sister Mama, a.k.a. Sister Marcia. I ain't forget about you. Also, our Philadelphia connection with Empress Chief, Brother Lumumba, Brother Moses, El Pollinator. They had an excellent historical and had the MOVE organization, the remaining members of the MOVE organization that did 40 years in jail, and they had the pictures on what happened in Philly. That program was excellent. So that's Blog Talk Radio every Saturday at 10 o'clock, and it's a Zoom presentation where you can zoom in. So we want to thank Sister Empress and the Million Women's March, our Philadelphia connection. Big ups. Also, Ayo Kamati, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio. Now this is very important. Sankofa Revolutionary Radio is listener-supported radio out of Birmingham, Alabama. Brother Anthony Mohammed. And on Mondays, they have programs come on all day. On Mondays, you have one two blockbuster program that I am truly in favor of. From 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. you have Dr. Haru, and then from 10 to 11 a.m. you have the Irritated Genie, giving you so much information on Jews of the problem and the psychology of the Jew, the real story behind the United States arresting of Charari in Haiti. So we want to thank Anthony Mohammed. But Dr. Haru and the Genie's program from 9 to 10 and 10 to 11, and you could actually call in and ask any kind of medical questions, and you take what you need, you take what you need. But Genie has got an excellent program, and he brings it down. Our Baltimore connection, Brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City. He comes on Saturday. The Saturday program is Blockbuster. State of the City, Darren Muhammad on Facebook, Instagram. But also he comes on Wednesday and sometime on Thursday. So if you tune in to Darren Muhammad, State of the City, 12 o'clock on TuneIn Radio, Instagram, and YouTube, Darren is laying it down. That's a big ups to that brother. Every Tuesday, Dr. Aline, Your Immunity Project, his program even comes on Califani Radio. It comes on Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, but he has a program come on 3 o'clock every Tuesday. And you can call in, and it's about 30 or 40 people on, and you can listen to the information with Dr. Aline. But not only does he does that, he comes back with a rebroadcast at 7 o'clock. So if you missed the 3 o'clock, you can come on at 7, but you can't ask him no questions at the 7 o'clock. It's rebroadcast. So we want to thank Dr. Elaine. Also, our African Echoes family, Brother Trust Graham and African Echoes family, that's every Friday. And they're doing the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat toward the reclamation of the African mind. That's African Echoes Friday at 8 o'clock. But they also come back with the Know Thyself study group out of Asbury Park. Trust Graham is also the mediator of that group, and they're doing the destruction of black civilization. Also, the Simultap organization with Dr. James McIntosh, Betty Dobson, and Richard Dean Theodore. The Simultap organization is still going strong, and the other organizations that give them support and going against Netflix with that disgusting rebroadcast cartoon of the Good Times television series. But they so slick, they give some people some positive junk, so you don't have to look at where they disrespecting you with the Good Times TV. They are disrespecting black folks all over the place, and then they give you some good phony programs so you don't have to look at the bad stuff they're doing. They don't respect us. They ain't gonna give us nothing if they don't respect us. And they disrespect us every day in the media. They disrespect black men, they disrespect black women, and they disrespect black people all the time, these Jews in media. So those programs, also the UNIA, we had a problem with the March Sunday, but that's what happened. They're having their 67th UNIA at Restoration, August 20th and 24th, and also you have the Rock Store, 13205 Merritt Boulevard, and what the UNIA is basically doing is trying to get us out of spending our money with people that don't respect us and go into a store that's run by black folks, controlled by black folks, and owned by black folks. And what they're trying to do is to get us, is to start going there at least once a month. I've been there a few times, excellent store, respectful, very good. So they're trying to get us to spend our money other places instead of spending money with people that basically don't care. So this is the UNIA, and they're having their convention as we speak. Raymond and Michael Duncan. So in honor of Marcus Garvey, in honor of Black August, the UNIA is trying, and we're going to be victorious. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. One of our good friends with the Mackey's Group, he has numerous articles in the Daily Challenge, author of numerous books on Barack Obama and different individuals. Sonny Carson, he's a big friend of the Mackey's Group. Ladies and gentlemen, straight back from Egypt, we want to give you our keynote speaker who always comes down and helps us out, Dr. Fred Monderson, tribute to the ancestors.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. Hotep, hotep, hotep. I'm going to go straight into it. Recently, I met a sister, a veteran, a black veteran, and she told me much of what is being said about the veterans only concern the male veterans. And there's very little that you can hear about women veterans. I remember, if you go to visit the White House, that park in front of the White House at the four corners, there are individuals who fought in the American Revolutionary War. And in the first one, you can see there's a female handing a sword to one of the fighters, the Frenchmen who came to fight. So in fact, women have been in the forefront of our struggle, and they need to be recognized and give their props. As such, then, I have dedicated this poem, which I call Black African Womanism. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Black African Womanism. So, in this evening's celebration of women, I give you the African woman, the black woman, blessed with beauty, charm, and wit, a unique specimen encapsulated in many experiences, from being whipped, worshipped as goddesses and queen mother, to enslaved household servant, a revolutionary victim of racism, incarceration, sexually stereotyped, and so forth, to constantly cultivate the art of sexual politics, having been a victim of sex on demand by the slave master, his son, and the overseer. She often boasts, I'm certainly not homogenized chocolate milk, but can dictate when and where I enter, all with stunning effect. Excelling as an intellectual, but more forcefully doubling as compassionate wife, mother, churchgoer, entrepreneur, professional, even musician, and most important, too blessed to be stretched. Thus, it's is easily recognized from time immemorial, whether Deadnesh, she's called Lucy, to Eve, particularly even the mythological goddesses, queens, and just plain folks. Today's circumstances demand educational activism, political practitioners possessing insightfulness. Yet through it all, the African woman has demonstrated an illustrious history, a spirit, symbol, motif, and individual of profound spiritual substance, resoluteness beyond the norm, whether wielding power, supporting husband, family, or simply being loved and admired, the black woman has earned iconic stature. Virtuous soul, champion standing as a magnificent work of art, woman manifested virtue and desires. What a wonderful price to capture the whole and to love. And so, in praising the African woman, Dr. Yosef Ben Johanan, in admonishing the black man to love the black woman whom he placed upon the high pedestal, reminded he has done what he cannot do. Given the obelisk is a small pyramid on a high dais, this is where Dr. Ben placed the African black woman. Even Michael Jackson admonished, don't break young girls' hearts. His many magnificent historical and cultural works notwithstanding, disrespectful and cherished adulation looms large in the revered ancestors' claim to fame. Inasmuch as Shu and Tefnut from Egyptian mythology, Shu and Tefnut fame, who in the mythology, Shu separated Geb, the earth god, from the sky goddess Nut. Pregnant from the embrace, the embellished heart, body, and legs as the four pillars of heaven, supporting construction of the heavens. In analyzing this remarkable phenomenon, Dr. Ben Johanan went so far as to claim heaven is between a black woman's legs. After all, the goddess Nut, as depicted on the ceiling of a small kiosk within its own court in the temple of Dendera. Her image not only shines her rays on the temple, but showed giving birth to the sun in the morning. This manifesting power then sails across her heavenly body to be swallowed up at evening time. Having overcome the challenges of the mighty experience in the underworld, this phenomenon is repeated all over on the next morning. Creation in process, with woman as dynamo in continuous rebirth, is something only woman as divine personage can bring to fruition. Strange yet still, Nut, like the goddess Nephthys, Isis's companion and counterpart, the hardest woman in the divinity business, mirrors the efforts of so many modern women. They get little or no credit for profound effort, though they continue to perform nevertheless. Fast forward to these modern times. Cherise Prevail, my grandmother, was the first black African internationalist activist in our family. Devotedly religious, and who would have been 130 years old on January 19, 2025. January 19 being the holiest day in ancient Egypt, day of the birth of Osiris, and also my friend Melinda Melbourne's birthday. On March 6, 1957, my mother, Mita Monderson, dressed in the flag of the West African Ghanaian nation, advocated for and celebrated its independence on Ghana Day celebration. She was a Pan-African internationalist of note and a woman of deep and enduring religious and spiritual profession, extolling conviction in religious practice and human behavior. Locally in Brooklyn, in Crown Heights, Ruth Goring and her daughter Lewis, as well as Elsie Richardson and Margaret Vincent, did much for the community, but sadly they are not remembered in any meaningful way. In ancient Egypt, goddesses played a crucial role in the drama of heavenly experience. Queens sat in equality beside kings, exerting influence in matters of state, but more important in composition of the divine triad of husband, wife, and son. When Ra, Rat, and El Horus, the Heliopolis triad, Isis, Osiris, and Horus, the Abydos triad, Sekhmet, Ptah, and Nefertiti, later Imhotep, the Memphite triad, Saket and Ankhet supported Khnum and the Kairak, the Aswan Kairak triad, and Karnak, it was Abu Mut and Kansu, the Theban triad. Among the creeds, the high standards of morality, creative thinking, in decision-making, influencing events and development of their day, all making them mark in times. We hear of Teti Sheri, Queen Mother, wife of a great warrior, Ahotep, Queen, revolutionary, soldier, one who fought a coup to save the throne for her progeny. Amos Nefertari, Queen, goddess with constructed temple, ancestress, the most venerated person in all of Egyptian history. A tremendous symbol who blazed a trail to influence generations. Hatshepsut, queen, king, builder, woman wielded pharaonic power and creating long-lasting cultural innovation. Ti, wife, inequality, mother, power behind the throne of Amenhotep III. Nefertiti, wife, mother, partner in religious revolution, worshipping the Aten divinity. Nefertari, wife, symbol of the own temple, beloved. These remarkable visionaries and symbols have all borne the mantle of African womanism with distinction and admirable excellence to be emulated. In Middle African history, Arab travelers reported the women of West Africa were free, friendly, and generous. A sort of Dionysian mentality prevailed in their behaviors, lifestyles, and surroundings. These same women were later captured, then marched to the door of no return to be forced to lay the foundation of chattel slavery in the new world of North and South America and the Caribbean. When Sonny Carson, the Brooklyn activist, repatriated his uncle, the runaway Samuel Carson, then he took him back to Ghana to open the door of return. He was buried alongside an enslaved African woman from Jamaica, West Indies, named Crystal. Now they two lay together at a place called Asinmanso, beside the river where Africans were given their last bath before they were shipped to the New World. Faced with challenges amidst tragedy, Queen Nzinga fought Portuguese slave dealers, and equally the magnificent Yara, Asantewaa-led Ghanaian soldiers against British colonial machinations to free her beloved land. There is something about the soil of Ghana producing the remarkable Ya Asantewaa and the illustrious Kwame Nkrumah, and the land where W.E.B. Du Bois chose to be buried and where Leonard Jeffries and James Small extolled to such great heights. Bottom Belly and Queen Mary rode with the Hill Gully Riders in Jamaica, resisting colonial efforts, etching their names in Caribbean history. Phyllis Wheatley, the poet, demonstrated intellectual capabilities amidst the sorrowful experience of chattel slavery in America, where all around slave farms and slave coffles brought black women to slave marts to be examined in public by literous slave-owning businessmen. Sadly, Sally Hemings was undeniably victimized by one of our first president, Thomas Jefferson, and not freed upon his death. Sojourner Truth advocated against the cruelty of slavery, and Harriet Tubman admirably ran a railroad, rescuing many to live free or die. Constance Baker Motley championed African people in writing and actions amidst rampant American terrorism, manifested in unconscionable lynching after the long night of African captivity in these new worlds. Mary McLeod Bethune as educator freed the African mind, while Barbara Jordan sought redemption through political activism. And Sybil Williams and Gertrude Ben Johanna resolutely supported John Clark and Joseph Denhanu as they spoke truth to power, uplifting the African freedom in his mind to challenge the might of the oppressor. Nomsa stood resolutely in revolutionary fervor beside the deep-thinking little giant Elome Bra, who held high the symbol of Patrice Lumumba in Pan-African manifestation, even as the African continent struggled to be free. What more can be said of Michelle Obama, that quintessential crown jewel whose heritage chronicled the slave experience within the Deep South amidst its slave coffers? Enslaved representative of African cultural heritage, traveled from the plantations back to the White House, for while Michelle's husband Barack Obama did one business right, he came home to a wonderful, beautiful, and loving black woman and reminded of her enslavement heritage experience. Even as the significant, great intellect and blessedness were demonstrated after such as that heinous and unspeakable tragedy expressed in the magnanimity of the demonstrated in Mother Emanuel's forgiveness. But who could forget the recent Buffalo killings in which black womanhood was again victimized, even as the devil's disciples suffered from men of race war. Thus, within the broader context, seen as much as history has rightfully sought to place African women in a better light, we need to further give credence to conditions of African women in the workforce, whether in terms of employment, promotion, salary, victims of sexual harassment, qualifications for job security, whether in government or in the private sector, in the board and emergency rooms, and especially in education, whether at the basic level of college, even the higher levels, particularly postgraduate research opportunities. Sustainable marriages, child rearing to create strong families oriented towards the future. The black woman remained a quintessential jewel. The role of Negro organizations such as Delta Sigma Theta, Alpha Kappa, Alpha, Dorothy Height, and National Council of Negro Women, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, the National Congress of Black Women, Sister Love, the National Women's Justice Initiative, and many others, all remain chapters extolling African womanism. People such as Ida B. Rhodes, a fierce champion who chronicled and fought against lynching, a frightful weapon in the 19th and 20th century American terrorism. Fannie Lou Hamer, political champion demanding to be heard in the 1968 convention, charging a course that would impact and affect her people. Martin C.J. Walker, an entrepreneur who paved the way for black women economic enterprise and espousing excellence for sustainable growth in human endeavor. Amy Jacks Garvey, inspiration and pillar of support for her man and behind the Garvey movement, symbol of creative influence among many as Queen Rhonda Moore and her cubs. Mortal Edgar Medgar Evers, wife shot in assassination and led to carry on yet bore the mantle of responsibility very well. Coretta Scott King, iconic in her own right, need I say more? For she remained the wind behind Martin Sales. Rosa Parks, tired but carried on to ignite a movement whose outstanding example as a quintessential American, in the end she was humbled and laying stake in the nation's capital rotunda. Betty Shabazz, champion of the people, symbol and galvanizing force for nationalists and people of goodwill, an example that made Malcolm X proud. Shirley Chisholm boldly proclaimed, "I am unbought and unbossed," especially as she saw the nation's highest honor of the U.S. President. Viola Plummer, revolutionary, long on the battlefield, a woman who refused the 30 pieces of silver. Africa, besmirched, yet carry on as champion, never forgetting the plight of Abu Jamal. Betty Dobson, tenacious revolutionary, warrior woman, co-chair of Secretary, and who refused to genuflect an altar of power. And Sandra, Queen Mother, intellectual giant, an education icon who relished in beloved. Yet took time to train, encourage, and serve as influence to a great many. Michelle Obama, embodiment of charm, grace, intellect, fashionista, standing by her man and never forgetting ancestral heritage. Even as many spewed invectives on her, but to no avail. Oprah Winfrey, woman for all seasons. Let us constantly remember, Frederick Douglass once said of Negro or black women, if by the heights from which they have come, rather than heights to which those blessed with centuries of opportunities have attained, Negro women need not hang their heads in shame. Now, you know why we not just offer praise poetry, but protest. Thus we have that profound cadre of black women of resolute and tenacious, conscious determination, spiritual and philosophic humaneness, cultural and educational tenacity, intellectual fortitude and nobility of spirit, the quintessential dynamics engendering articulation, the highest standards of manifestation of African womanism. Boldly looking to the future, resolutely standing to educate the people and nation to meet whatever challenge comes, all the while constructing crystal staircases, enabling African women families to ascend to the greatest height. And then to end that, this came to nuke the sky goddess who they worked in the sun in the morning and swallowed them up in the afternoon. He traveled through her body and then emerged on the eastern horizon. Oh, perfect daughter, mighty one of thy mother, who are crowned like a king of the north. Make this peppy spirit soul in me. Let him not die, O great lady, who does come into being in the sky, who are mighty, who does make happy, and does fill every being with thy beauty. The whole earth is under thee. Thou hast taken possession of it. Thou hast encompassed the earth. Everything is in thy 2 hands. Grant thou that this peppy may be in thee like an imperishable star. Thou hast associated with Kev in thy name of Pet or Sky. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my tribute to these black women who don't get the recognition they deserve. Thank you very much. Now, before I get into my presentation for today, I want to do a little housekeeping. Right? I was going through my archives and I found a couple of things that I want to bring to your attention. This is an article I wrote for the Daily Challenge in 1997. It's called Black Solidarity Day, History and Vision. I found this certificate of recognition that was given to me by the borough president of Brooklyn, Howard Golden, for perfect attendance for the entire year of 2000. As Dr. Mark was saying, he did already. Okay, so now we have something that I've done in praise of Dr. Yosef Ben Johan. This one was done in Harlem. What's the address? 724 St. Nicholas Avenue, between 145th Street up there. I did this in 2015 in praise of Dr. Ben. I'm not going to give you more about details about the address. I'm asking what you would like to learn about Dr. Ben's house. Okay, I've done some memorials in honor of Dr. Ben. So I did in 2017 this memorial entitled Let's Liberate the Temple. I've done what nobody has ever done. I've done 3 lectures in Karnak Temple in honor of Dr. Ben Johanna. When I came back for the 4th, that was in, this was in 2018. When I came back in 2019 to do 4th lecture, the people said, no, you can't do it. This is not some guy taking a bunch of people into the temple and standing on this corner and said that this is a column and that's a statue. This is a lecture that was recorded by the Temple of Karnak's scientific community. Perhaps they didn't like what I was saying, and they said, well, you had 3 times, this is good enough. My poem to the great goddess, Amis Nefertari, I got it in two versions, where she's wearing white, red, and blue. It's not red, white, and blue. It's white, red, and blue. And this one where she's more colorfully represented. So these are some of the house-cleaning items that I wanted to bring to your attention. Even more important, much more important. Today, I uploaded a new book to Amazon.com. It is called Kings and Commoners at Luxor Temple. Nobody's done this. Shuala Little Biss did a 2-volume set about 1961 or so. He spent 10 years in the temple, measuring everything. Every piece of rock, stone, statue, you name it. But a full-length book, nobody has done that. This is the first time. And it should be available, I would say, within the next 72 hours. What I find interesting is that when a regular gets up here and tells you what all these books, but I don't see anybody running out there and buying these books. You know, you got to get off of your fat cushions and support our movement. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. So I'm coming up with another one, I mean, within the next month or so, Synthesis, Ancient Egypt. About righteousness, King of Egypt, and African Psyche. All right, okay. What about religion and temple in ancient Egypt? And last but not least, eternal house, the Egyptian tomb. So beyond Temple of Luxor, these are the 4s. They're more like 90%, 95% complete. I'm working on their indices and everything. You know, I gotta do everything right. I gotta research right, do the photography, do the editing, do the index, all of this stuff. But I do it proudly in honor and in aid of educating and edifying my people. When I quit the bonds of this earthly residence, then I would have left something that my people can be educated and benefit from. That's why I work as hard as I do. It's not an easy thing. And that's why I got to hand it to Brother Ray for his continuous commitment to this education and edifying of his people. And then with that, I would say, let's give Brother Ray a big hand. So, ladies and gentlemen, my topic this evening is called Remembering the Ancestors. This week, of course, August 17 was the birthday of Marcus Messiah Garvey. So we remembered this illustrious ancestor and so many others. All of the ladies whose names I read, those are illustrious ancestors who have made us proud, bore the battle, and can be inspiration for us going forward. Never mind what these other guys are doing. We ain't going nowhere. Okay. So my topic today is called Let's Remember the Ancestors. Okay. So, you know, I like to prepare before I get here, so I like to write myself down. Whatever I tell you, you can run to the bank with that and make a deposit. There's no question. You're not to do no research. I did the research. I don't present any kind of questionable material to you because I respect you. Okay, that's why I go through all of this. So, to begin, we must seek to understand. Remembering the ancestors is more than paying reverence to individuals who have made exceptional contributions sacrifices on behalf of the community among whom they live. These people stood for something. They stood up to challenge social, political, even educational inequity. But it's more than this. We celebrate their artistic skills, their intellectual attainment, and even more important, their moral and ethical standards of behavior. Still more important, their care, concern, and compassion for fellow community members, humanity in general. These are traits that help to define these individuals we celebrate in remembrance. Whether we realize it or not, commemorating the ancestors itself brings a heavy responsibility. The life of the people we celebrate was a historical reality, a process of becoming, an evolution of their kind to iconic status, either as creator or in creativity, as well as a bulwark against injustice, as represented by some force acting in an ungodly manner. Therefore, as we stand our ground, we must, like the contract may hold, take on the mannerism, moral and ethical courageous behavior, in a sense, becoming the people we celebrate, especially embarking on one of our mission. That is, if we can consciously realize the ancestors were a part of us, are a part of us, and will always be a part of us. So, as R.A. Schwaller, the Lubis, the symbolist in Sacred Science, the king of Pharaonic theocracy in a note insisted, be ye vigilant concerning our duty, your duty. Be ye not careless concerning any of your rules. Be ye poor, be ye clean concerning divine things, and guard your heart. Remember, the heart is weighed against the felon in the judgment sacrostation among the ancestors. As such then, things being equal in development of the proper frame of mind, the ancestors guarded adherence in spiritual metaphysical inspiration and protection, thereby invigorating courage for the tasks that lie ahead. In ancient Egypt, this inspiring protection is very evident as witnessed in processions. Processions were significant parts of Pharaonic kingly experience, as, for example, from extant evidence during the New Kingdom, when Amun-Ra was king of the gods who resided in Karnak temple. Whether within the hypostyle hall for internal ritual or ceremonial celebrations, or external voyages to distant regions to celebrate whether the Open Festival at Luxor Temple, the Min Festival, or at Museum or at Medinet Habu, mortuary temples of Ramses II and III, respectively. The Feast of the Valley, in which the kings visited the tombs of ancestor kings, or the 10-day festival that leaves the valley and returns back to Karnak Temple. Bring God back home as all such travels involve processions, by land and by boat. Indeed, especially in distant voyages, the ancestral spirits represented by standards precede the king, offering their protection even as he leaves the procession. Again, in ancient Egypt, so many places in Africa, whether in their personal or collective immortal reality, in their minds or in a place set aside, permanent or portable, a shrine of the ancestors is where the point or nexus of communication, a place where the living and the dead are transparent and communicate with each other. That place where spiritual, religious, even courageous power is infused not just in the act of celebrating, but in girdling oneself, the community, the spiritual and metaphysical warriors, setting out to meet the awful foe. We must remember that the answers are everywhere in the shrines of the ancestors, in the processions, at the tomb, and even among the people and in the afterlife. first understand the ancestors are important. In the nexus where the tomb abuts the other world, the afterlife, there is a false door. Many people never understand what the door is. You can't open the door. The door is not really for you. The false door in the tomb is a spot where the world and the next, where this world and the next world meets. But it's not for humans to enter for the dead, but for the dead to come through to visit and receive whatever offerings are placed in the tomb. That is, after he had gone to the place of judgment, examination, before being cleared, Malkeru, through a voice, having made the declaration of virtues, that is called the Declaration of Confessions, all with ancestors as witnesses. So whatever you do down here, they're waiting for you over there. In that journey into the afterlife, the spirits of pain and the spirits of decay, ancestors accordingly welcome the king in the following manner. They say to the king, how lovely to see, how pleasing to observe. So say the gods, how this God was forth to heaven, how Unas is the king of the old kingdom, one of the pyramid builders. He said that Geb, the earth god, has arranged for him the type of thing which had been done to him, Geb himself. To him, Unas, according to the pyramid text, so you know, the religious, quote-unquote Bible or religious text that remained unchanged until they were discovered in the 19th century, so there was no editing. These are pure religious, conscious, intellectual ideas about the afterlife that was generated and placed within temple, pyramids of the 5th and 6th dynasty. There were 5 tombs. So we had the pyramid text, which of the Old Kingdom, which with some modifications became the coffin text of the Middle Kingdom, and by the time of the great flowering of the New Kingdom, these inscriptions on stone were now re-edited onto papyrus so that you can carry it with you as you would carry a book. So, to him, Unas, according to the pyramid, come the gods, the souls of pain and the souls of naked. The souls of pain and the souls of naked represented the 2 ladies who were a part of the king's name. You know, the king had 5 names. He had a Horus name, which is as a successor to his father Osiris, who was killed by his uncle Seth. So he succeeded to the throne. So he had the Horus name. The golden Horus name, which is the second name, was the name that he was formed of the same substance of the gods, which was of gold. This imperishable form of metal. The second name. His third name, the two ladies who protected the god, and they manifest in a single uraeus or a serpent on the brow of the king. You know, it's interesting that the Egyptian kings had one uraeus on their crowns, while the Ethiopian kings who formed the 25th dynasty had 2. It sets them apart. But they didn't consider themselves different to their brothers to the north. So the gods belonging to heaven and the gods belonging to earth. They made for Unas support of their arms, and thou makest thou mountest to heaven, climbest upon it in the name of its ladder. So the gods, they had extended an ankh from their arms between the wrist and the elbow on both sides, and allowed the king to hang on to that, and they pulled him up into heaven. Let heaven be given to him, let earth be given to him. Thus, a tomb was a form of Ra. You see, Ptah was initially the first god, and he created Ra, Atum. You see, in the morning, the tri-divinity concept was represented by Kepra, the beetle who emerged in the morning, Kepra. At noon, midday, he became Ra in full glory at 12 o'clock. And by evening, 6, 7, when it started, he became Atum. So Kepra, Ra, Atum was the same God in 3 different manifestations in his journey across the hill. So it was Geb who spoke about it with Atum. So we must, however, realize ancestral spirits do not only welcome and offer protection in the afterlife. They are active among the living, blessing, protecting, celebrating, inspiring the members of the community they were once a part of. This is evidence we see according to Henry Frankfurt in his book called Kingship and the Gods. In the reliefs of the great temples, we find ancestral spirits. Again, pay attention. These guys are all over. They're probably right here looking down and not seeing that we're doing the right thing. And we are. Together with Wajed and Negbeh. Okay, so the third name, so we have the Horus name, we call the Horus name, we have the 2 ladies' name, which is Wajed and Negbeh. The 4th name was the Sutanbat name, that is to say, the name that the king got when he was coronated and he was enthroned, and he took up a new name called, by which all his official documents were be signed, the Sutanbat. He was king of Upper Lower Egypt. And then his birth name was his son of Ra name. So he had 5 names: Horus name, the golden Horus, the 2 ladies, the Sutanbat, and the son of Ra. Now the Sutanbat and the son of Ra names are the 2 names we see in the cartoon. There is a rope tied to encase and enclose and protect the name of the king. One is called the prenomen and one is called the nomen. So the Sutanbat name is the prenomen and the son of Ra name is the nomen, which is the son of Ra name is his birth name. That's the name that his mother gave him at birth. The Sutanbat name is the name that he got when he became king. The 2 ladies' name is the name of the 2 ladies, north and south, who protected him. The golden Horus name is his body was comprised of nothing but gold. The Horus name is his name as a successor to his father's side. So, in the reliefs of the great temple, we find ancestral spirits together with Wajed and Negbeh, the 2 little goddesses of Lower and Upper Egypt, introducing the king to the great god Amun. Amun sits on the throne. They carry the king in. Hey, big brother, big king, sir. This is the king. Or they acclaim the new ruler before Amun at his accession. Immediately after the enthronement. Okay, so when we speak of the enthronement, I'll come back to that. The new king is taken into the fair orb, probably crowned here with the white crown of Upper Egypt, a corresponding ceremony taking place in Port Nezer. We have seen the final acts of the Set Festival confirm the bond between ancestors and rulers, and the mystery play of the succession ends with the introduction into the dual shrines of a group of priests serving the king's deceased predecessors or his ancestors. Okay, there's a lot that I got to unpack here. The royal car was an ethereal substance of cosmic power that was established when normal or means established Egyptian kingship at 3200 BC. It was an unbroken line, and even though the kings may change, they sort of attach themselves to this unending spiritual reality. Okay? So now, I don't lose my thought, right? Where was that? Okay. Anyway, there were a number of festivals. The Sad Festival. The Sad Festival goes back to the beginning of the coronation process. So we have the old king reigning, and he dies. And when he dies, before he's buried, he is mummified in a 7-day period of preparation. That is to say, his body is soaked in this concoction that is comprised of salts, minerals, spirits, you name it. But in the meantime, the whole society enters into a period of mourning because they have lost this revered individual. Now, as we get to the middle of the new kingdom, the king chooses his successor. Before he chose his successor, he didn't tell anyone who would succeed him. So aspirants to the throne often plotted to seize power when the old king died. And there were 2 instances where attempts were made. The first of them in 12th dynasty. The king, after a very tiring day, got home, flopped down on his bed, and before he could close his eyes, he heard some rumblings of people running to him, towards him, laying in bed. He jumped up, took out his sword, and he fought them off until relief came, and he was able to overcome that assassination attempt. And the second is when the young prince, potentially his successor, was out in battle somewhere, and the old king was murdered in the castle. And word came to him on the morning of the battle, and he left the battlefield unbeknown to most, and took a few choice members of his inner circle and hurried to the castle and chose and established himself as being in command. You remember there was that guy, I think it was Hart or whatever, I can't remember. One of these presidents, when I think during Reagan's time, he jumped up and said, I'm in charge. He was Secretary of State, I think, something like that. So he said, I'm in charge. So after that time, the king decided he's going to establish a core region. A core region would determine who will be the next king. So all of a sudden, everybody knew who was going to succeed the king. So the old king dies, and he's being prepared for burial. And in the meantime, his successor, who's already chosen, identified, he has to do certain things before he can actually become king. All right? One of the things would be ultimately the coronation. But there is what is called the succession passion play. He has to visit important sites throughout the country so that the people would see him. He's like, I'm the next guy or whatever. And then ultimately he is crowned. Once he's crowned, he has to be enthroned. That is to say, he has to sit on the throne. But he does not come. So once he's enthroned, he becomes, let's say, 95% king. Now he has to voyage to Heliopolis. Okay, there were centers of religious doctrines, religious worship. For instance, Heliopolis, which is called An, or Anu in the Bible, or Anu. Anu was a city founded at the beginning of Egyptian history by black people from the south who in their voyage down the river, established several cities. Esna, Heliopolis. Heliopolis was a Greek name. But Heliopolis, where Ra was worshipped, was a site where magically, metaphysically, and spiritually the king was transformed from a mere mortal king into a god. So once everything is done, you still have to go down to Heliopolis and they put that little essence that made him the divinity that he was done going to be represented. So when that, before all of that transpires, the old king now is buried. There is a ceremony at the tomb's entrance. Those of you who have been to Dr. Ben's funeral at the church in Harlem, where Reverend Butts was the pastor. Professor Smalls did the opening of the mouth ceremony on Dr. Ben. The opening of the mouth ceremony is to give the deceased, the king, Dr. Ben, the right to speak on his behalf in the next world, in the afterlife, to be able to reconstitute his entire body. When he was wrapped in swaddling cloths as a mummy, or he was disarrayed, where his body was cut up into pieces, with the power in parallel in his, through the opening of the mouth ceremony, he was able to speak for himself at the judgment and say, well, listen, I've never done these 42 confessions. Monaco Ranga calls them the declaration of virtues. All right? Then now, he's declared true of voice, Mark Herod. Now they sent a divine messenger back to earth saying that the king made it. He passed the test. He's now going to become a full-fledged God among the gods. And once that message is received, then the young king is finally transformed, ascends the throne, and rules in his father's state. Okay. So the king's ascent is sanctioned by an agreement between Atum, the sun god in heaven, and Geb, the earth god, who has received and holds the body. So there are two concepts here. One is that we know that the body is deposited in the earth, but the spirit ascends to heaven. So one God is in charge of the heavenly realm, and one God in charge of the earthly realm. So Ra presides in heaven, and Geb presides on earth. And Geb's son, Osiris, who is murdered and resurrects, he succeeds his father as to rule in the earthly realm of the afterlife. So we know that the souls of Pe and souls of Neked are active ancestral spirits who are doing a number of things over there and down here, right? But their most important functionality is to make sure that their community receives all the benefits. But they're not just, I don't want to use the word patsies, but they will tell you, you do right or we will punish you. Okay? So they know when you're doing the right thing, they reward you, and when you're doing the wrong thing, they stop eating those tracks. In the processions, okay, so I said that there are processions that sort of rule the whole idea of Egyptian kingship. All right, that is to say, a procession is a group of people marching from one place to the other, whether they're within the temple or outside of the temple. Okay, let's say, for example, a procession in the temple. So the king there are two types of temples. for example. There is the worship of the God temple, and there is the mortuary or king temple. The God and worship temple is generally on the east bank of the river. The worship temple, the worship temple, the mortuary temple is on the west side. We don't have much evidence, surviving evidence of palaces, but most of in the New Kingdom especially, most of the kings built a mortuary temple, a temple where he was going to be worshipped. And adjacent to the temple was a palace where he stayed when he's going to visit the temple. Remember now, he's got to be traveling back and forth across the country, so he doesn't get to his temple every day. Nevertheless, there's a palace there. So we have evidence at Medinhahu where the king is seen leaving the temple, leaving the palace to enter the temple. So he leaves the palace. Well, when he wakes up in the morning, he goes to a place called Perdet. P-E-R-D-W-E-T, Perdet. We call it the bathroom over here, where you do your early morning toiletry. So he's given his bath, his dress, his fed, and all that, then he goes to the temple. Now when he gets to the temple, he has to be baptized or cleansed a second time. He's cleansed in the bathroom, in the Perdet, in the house in the morning. When he gets to the temple, he got an entourage of priestly figures waiting for him. They have to wash him or baptize him before he enters into the temple. Generally, depending on the size of the temple, that priest, the officiating priest, will go to every room in the temple and then incenses. And in incensing it, he's bringing to life all of the elements within the temple, whether it's statues, walls, illustrations on the walls, or whatever. Everything comes back to life. That is to say, because the night before, not only the god, but the temple goes to sleep. So the temple has to wake up in the morning, come back to life before the day's ritual can begin. And at the temple's entrance, the king forms a procession that goes into the sanctuary where the God is residing, wakens him, and the God's toilet. Okay? So you need any water? So this procession is comprised of the king leading and his various levels of priestly dignitaries follow him. The chief priest and his assistant, and then there are people carrying different things. People carrying the reading material. People reading. There's an orchestra, a vocal and instrumental orchestra. People carrying food, clothing, incense, flowers, you name it. And they begin marching towards the sanctuary. Now, let's make a distinction here. If I'm over, let's say I'm in Manhattan, we're in New York, as you know. So I'm in Manhattan, and I say to you, oh, okay, over there in Brooklyn is the sanctuary. Okay? Now, when I come over to Brooklyn, there is a place in Brooklyn that is called the sanctuary where the God lived. So, from a distance, the temple is the sanctuary of that God, but once you get into the enclosure wall, the sanctuary is a separate room that the king now leads this procession from the entrance to this holy site. Now, as they're getting closer and closer to that concentric sacred spot, because, concentric circles go out, so concentric circles can also move in. And as they're moving in, the procession, the number of people in the procession begins to dwindle. And only the top echelon gets closer and closer. So he gets to the door, and the night before, he had put, as you would lock the door, he affixed a binding entity then close the door. So he has to open that and enter into the door, and then do the, announcing to God that he's here and what have you, and then begin the daily ritual. So, okay. So recently, I was at in all the activities that the king is involved in, he always looked for the blessings from above. Okay? So the God said to him, "We give thee all life and happiness, all nourishment, all sacrifices which come out of the Nile, all good things which are in Upper and Lower Egypt, thus having appeared as king of Upper and Lower Egypt, living unto eternity." So that's Frankfurt saying that. Okay. Recently I was at a House of Justice rally where Reverend Sharpton spoke to his congregation, simultaneously beseeching spiritual power, essence, to engulf him in a cloak of protection, to successfully bring about the March on Washington, the March on Wall Street on August 28, 2025, next week, right, Thursday also. That last day in August, generally the 28th, wherein in the past, Reverend Sharpton, Dr. King, Young King, and Mark Morial called for and congregated in Washington, D.C., in the vicinity of the pyramids of American power, the legislative branch especially, to speak to those divine entity forces. It is easy to understand when Dr. King takes that stage, meaning Young King, and say that old King. Spiritually and socially, he invoked the audacity, courage, fluidity of expression, and manifested protection his great father, Dr. Martin Luther King, as an ancestor, powerfully laid it down. There, you don't always win, but the message is always clear. We're here to cash our check. In June, I remember coming back from Egypt. Before going, a friend requested I bring back some sand, some stone from the motherland, which I did. Unintentionally, I took some of this to the July 4th International African Arts Festival. There, a shrine of the ancestors exists. Somehow or the other, perhaps psychically instructed. I took some stones over to the Baba, who was about to begin his benediction, speaking in ritual to the ancestors he and others were communicating with, through the vessels of victuals placed in a corner surrounded by a candle with incense being burned, etc., etc. Therefore, so before he began, I said, "Hold it. I brought these stones from the Valley of the Kings for you." And he was barely enthused. He said, "Thank you." And spoke from the same crouching, because he was crouching to offer the sacrifices into the vessel, the basin or whatever. He said, "Thank you," and spoke in the same crouching manner, speaking across sacred time and sacred space to the spiritual existence, the spiritual consciousness, gathered, celebrating, listening in as we are doing in this world. So the ancestral spirit, when I say ancestral spirit, I'm talking about our ancestral spirit. The Sunday Cross, Jesus Lucy, and Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Robert Charlesworth, they're watching us. And so he said, "Brother Fred has brought us some stones from the Valley of the Kings, taking us back to the beginning." Where you were minded. Looking on the community, they probably knew this, but to hear it from this spiritual adherent, above ground, they certainly have pleased the many whose names were listed and celebrated in the numbers as ancestors who benefited this local community. To better understand where we are today, we must view our recent history. Like all conquerors, European imperialists in Africa first began by deriding African religious practices, calling such Africans ancestral worship. Practice is not true religion. But what is ancestor worship? Other than reverence for those of our heritage who have essentially lived previously, benefited the community, established cultural continuity, and a praise for the early experiences in interaction with their God and environment. In many places, such has been referred to as roots, no less an authority than Dr. Theophile Obenga, Dr. Diab's research associate, instructs African people to recognize ancestors such as Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, G. Wilson, Sonny Carson, Ella Brown, Eddie Shabbat, Fannie Lou Hamer, Dr. John Clark, Dr. Benton Hammer, Jay Rogers, Arthur Schomburg, Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Shaka Zulu, Queen of Sheba, Mansa Musa, Muhammad Ali, Reverend Shillingsworth, Nat Turner, Kwame Touré, Van Nevers, Rosa Parks, Hugh Scribner, W.B. Du Bois, Forbes Gardner, Jane Phillips Gay, Reverend Shellsworth, Coffee, Damon, H. Rap Brown, Hugh Newton, Sophie Carmichael, Kwame Touré, Nelson Mandela, Whitney Mandela, Secretary Brown, as well as Marcus Garvey, Peter Monderson, and more, for they not simply make us strong in the memory of their experiences, influence our thoughts and actions, and undergird our responses to challenges. Equally significant, ancestral inspiration helps signal to the oppressor, we know who we are, where we are, and what must be done in defense of and in continuity of our cultural heritage. If we look at Europe, England especially, as an example, their ancestor kings lie buried in crypts in Westminster Cathedral. There, preserved, praised, and protected remains of their ancestral past are considered and demonstrated that all we know. This is one of the holiest sites in all of the land. Unfortunately, the vicissitudes of the African ancestral past preclude the recognition of any such single location to be afforded the same type of untouched solemnity and reverence. This may be due to the practicalities of the process of historical evolution, and more recently, the impact of psychological, cultural, and physical devastation of ancestral spirit within the slave trade's middle passage and triangle trade, or should I say robbery, and resulting slavery, and most important, subsequent colonialism and imperialism, with attendant military, colonial, imperial, and intellectual ramifications, especially in seizure of cultural artifacts. Thus, attendant racial practices and expropriate significant values of African mineral resources has equally detached, devastated, devastated the African population and its culture. Thus, practically and by perception, there has been a systematic attempt by forces in Europe and America to misrepresent the African past, destroy or distort its historical memory, downplay its cultural attainments, as well as muddy the evidence, even as Africa seeks a credible corrective to show the past in a more constructive and instructive light. Of course, much of this follows what is called naked and enlightened imperialism. There is no question, particularly as Dr. Chikanta Diab was pointing out, Asianism was an African or black civilization, and the heritage of Africans worldwide, as Greece and Rome belongs to Europe. Yet and for, as an example, in the debasement and exploiting of ancient remains, the current culture of Egypt exposes the pharaohs' mummies of glorious 18 and 19 dynasties to the glare of the common eye simply for a pittance. This is why Absence to protections to be accorded these sacred relics, such must be emphasized and attended to continuously. African people must infuse their minds with tremendous, significantly potent knowledge of the history of such shapers of early African destiny, spiritual and metaphysical ethos, and more especially ensure the young that the ancestors are taught and be enmeshed in relative study. Again, there must be ongoing challenges to the oppressive, destructive act, forcing them to be cautious in promoting distortion and omission practices. In this unshaken stance, we know who we are, and this can be as scientists, teachers, artists, builders, doctors, priests, warriors, administrators, and much more important as husbands, fathers, brothers and sisters, sons and even friends and associates. Thus, we can and must recognize the mysticism and spirituality associated with a sacred space never loses its original divine nature and essence. Naturally, the ancestral Ethiopian dynasty in Egypt recognized and revered the ancestral mountain at Napata. But alas, time and destructive hand of man has impacted on this location. Nevertheless, one of the greatest elements of artifactic evidence to come out of Egypt was the Shabaka stone called the Memphite theology of the Memphite priests, which was considered the work of the ancestors. And this is not in the British Museum. It was translated by James Henry Beston in 1905, but it's in the British Museum, like so much what I call culture in captivity. In Louvre in Paris, in Germany, in Italy. You know, in 1881, in the Diribari cache, that is to say, a place where they discovered tremendous amount of hidden treasure and something like 22 mummies. And the Egyptians said, these are not leaving here. And in 1882, when this was discovered, only then that the museum was able to come up to the standard of the Turin, Italy Museum. They got so much stuff in Italy, in Germany, in France, in Paris, France, in England, in Scotland, in Australia. They got, I think, 1 or 2 Egyptian collections in all of Africa. And the Egyptians, I mean, they talk about brotherly love, give me a break. Excuse me. Fewer. You heard about the young brother who made the discovery, the young chemist or whatever. He discovered an element that is considered not as an additive to fuel, but a replacement of fuel. That's, okay, so you got your car, you put your gas, you put the one you got things to clean your engine or whatever. That's an additive. Whatever he discovered, the formula that he created, so you only gas. All you need is it. You know what that is? That is black gold to the extreme. His mother said they're looking to kill him because with him gone, so goes the knowledge. But they ain't gonna find him. We gotta bury somewhere there. Nobody can find him. But this is what's going on right now. I mean, it's an adjunct to what I'm talking about. But it just came to mind, and I thought I'd share it with you. You probably know about it, but nevertheless. Okay, the Chewbacca stone was a work of the ancestors. So you got to see this ancestral concept, idea, word is traversing the entire duration of dynastic rule. And it's also prevalent in many places in Africa. Right? So when those many names of our heroes and heroines that I've given you today, when we pronounce this, never mind that guy in Florida, the guy in Washington, D.C., we got juice that inspires and will propel us because we have memory. We have historic memory of our ancestors. So, the 25th dynasty was begun by a king named Pianki. And when he invaded Egypt, because, if you go into the Temple of Karnak, one of the first things in the Great Court is a kiosk made by his son, Shubaka, Taharka. And this structure has four entrances, north, south, east, and west. Right? And when Flinders Petrie, who's considered the father of Egyptian archaeology, when he was describing this kiosk of Taharka, he said it represented north, south, east, and west. And all of Egypt represented the north of Africa, or the north of Pianki's kingdom, which meant it shows how far south of his kingdom actually lay. So Pianki's kingdom, you may know that his northern border lay at Egypt, at Aswan, in that area. But his kingdom may have extended all the way back to South Africa. You know, some years ago, I was in the supermarket, and there used to be a supermarket tabloid called News of the World, and they had this every weekend when you go into the cashier, you could pick up one of the tabloids, and they had this article that British scientists have discovered the home of the Queen of Sheba, and it was discovered to be in Nigeria. And they showed you this beautiful Queen of Sheba, white woman. Okay, that man got a lot of mileage over what was said in the Bible, where the Queen of Sheba, when she met King Solomon, she said, "I am black and comely." They are saying, the oppressor is saying, she said, "I'm black, but I'm comely." So the American said, you see, she's saying on the one hand, I'm black and proud, but they're saying, in their interpretation, she's saying, sure, I'm beautiful, but I'm black. So my sergeant said that, okay, so this guy Solomon, he had a flame with the queen, right? So my sergeant said, he chased after her because if her kingdom extended from Nigeria, it extended all across the Sahara Belt. So her kingdom was 10 times as wide as his. So that is what, he already had 600 women, right? So but he was trying to make a political alliance. Political alliance became I heard the Reverend mention Chancellor Williams's book, Destruction of Black Civilization. And he also has an article called The Rebirth of Black Civilization. But two things he mentioned in that book that stayed with me forever. The first thing in the frontispiece, when you turn over the old leaf, the frontispiece, the traveler says to the old man, whatever happened to the people of Sumer? I heard they were black. And the old man responded, they lost their history and they were forgotten. So we must never lose our history because we're going to be forgotten. We need my work. Listen, I want you to run out there tomorrow, go to Amazon, buy as many books as you can, and give it out to your churches and all these people. Support my cause because I got a lot of work to do. I need help. I do a lot of heavy lifting. Nobody help me out. The second thing he said was that, he said that, see, that master Lord, they come and tell you you don't remember anything. Okay, I come back to it. But there were two things that was said that one certain was said regarding this particular situation. Oh yeah, no, Charles William. He said that the 18th dynasty began black but ended up white. Okay, now, Flinders Petrie, the father, I mentioned him before, the father of Egyptian, he said, and I always use this quote, the 17th dynasty coming from Nubia held Thebes as its capital. Well, the 17th dynasty and the 18th dynasty, the same dynasty, but Manetho, the Greek Egyptian priest who recorded who wrote the history of Egypt and created the dynasties, which is the only thing that modern scholars have created. He divided 17th and 18th dynasty into two actual dynasties because it represented the dynasty, the 17th dynasty kicked out the Hyksos and established the 18th dynasty or the new kingdom, and so he saw them as two different epochs, and so we have 17th and 18th dynasty. But the Nubians who formed the 17th dynasty were the same people who formed the 18th dynasty. So when Chancellor Williams says that the 18th dynasty began black and ended white, it ended white because many of the Syrian princes came to create a political marriage with the king of Egypt so that for whatever reason. And many of them, Theophilus Bender said, those people didn't become queen, they ended up as in the king's harem. Just like how Solomon had 600 of them, we don't know how they came about, if it was the same kind of operation. Okay. But these people who came, for the political, they didn't get what Nefertiti. Now there's a difference between Nefertari and Nefertiti. Nefertari is this black queen, this goddess I just showed you, right? This is Nefertari. Right? Nefertiti is the Syrian princess, Dushraga's daughter, who came to marry the magnificent Amenhotep III of the 18th dynasty. But Queen T said, "No, my husband too old. Marry my son." She married Amenhotep IV, who changed his name to Akhenaten. Right? Then again, a lot of these soul-pussers, if you will, they began attack. So she gave him 6 daughters. Married her, and he was considered the first revolutionary religious group. So they're saying, this guy looks so sick. Those daughters were not his. They praised Nefertiti for her beauty, and then they accused the guy of not being the father of her children. Now Nefertiti is seen with him worshiping the sun. Well, if that is the case, she's an unfaithful woman. She is beautiful, but she's unfaithful. And then she stands up there and praising God. So sometimes these people trap themselves in their own falsity, distortion, omission. And we got to be aware of that. That's why we got to know who we are, we got to know our history, and we got to tell our history. My friends, thank you for listening and just trying to get this information to you. So the current culture of Egypt prostitutes the recovered ancestor kings of the glorious 18th and 19th dynasty. Despite actions of Dr. Ben and Professor George Simmons, who were advocating that the mummies be returned to their tombs on the guard. Okay? But you can pay 100 pesos. What is 100 pesos? Not pesos, 100 Egyptian pounds. Right now, when I was in Egypt last month, in June, the pound was valued at what, 50 pounds to $1. So when you pay 100 pounds to see the kings of Egypt in a case in the museum, you give it $2. I remember sometime back when I was at Oxford University back in 1976, I went into the Tower of London, where they have the crown jewels. You buy a ticket to go in there and what have you, okay? But you cannot stand up and look at it, you know, say, hey, there's a guy there say, all you can do is glance. You just gotta walk, you buy a ticket to walk past the crown jewels of England. You can't stand up and look and say, hey, wait a minute, I didn't see. But for $2 American, you can watch the kings of Egypt in God's case, and the people making money off of that. That's not respect. So Dr. Denver said, we want to see those kings back in their tombs. You got to see the king, you got to see you go into the tomb. Okay, put him in the sarcophagus, you know he's in there. Well, you don't even look at him and looking to see if he got a boil on his butt behind or whatever. So Dr. Ben and Dr. Simmons and one another, and Dr. Lewis was of that age. And we are older guys here. We go back with that. But we were there when he was saying these things. We want the kings of Egypt back in their tombs, in their sarcophagus, in their tombs. Instead of the mummies, instead of lying in the current music, exposed to public glare and scrutiny and derision, they are prostituted for a few pieces of silver. Such would be unthinkable as in the English example given above. Recapturing and casting their existence in the lineage and pantheon is not simply a tremendous asset to African historiographic reconstruction, but again challenges the oppressor to be cautious, for we know who we are. The morals of African destiny, those who have gone on and those who are still here, and those yet to be born, must discover their destiny and bring about a positive change of good to benefit all humanity. One scholar whose works this right is familiar often insisted in many endeavors, intellectual and otherwise, we must start at the beginning. In such a referring to ancient Egypt, there are a number of instances where ancestral references are manifest and significantly various sides of the divide do not seem to fully grasp the important points of departure for understanding of historical corrective and legacy. The followers of Horus. So we're told that in the prehistoric period, the followers of Horus, these are the divine ancestors. The followers of Horus were blacksmiths. What does a blacksmith mean? He's a guy who works in iron. The question has always been, when did the Iron Age begin? We know that much of Egyptian civilization in the Mediterranean world was a part of the Bronze Age. But the followers of Horus mined iron. And then Dr. Van Sertman argued that they were also able to create high temperatures to create steel. I think steel is created between 14 and 1600 centigrade of heat. So they had developed this capacity to transform and produce iron. But the Ethiopians were not able to full-scale manufacture iron weaponry until after the invasion of Egypt in 8th, 7th, and 6th century BC. So the ancestors who worship as souls in many Egyptian cities seems likely enough. It is merely because they became ancestors of the pharaohs and those are pale that can be important in historical times. But they also souls in Heliopolis. So this whole idea of souls who are ancestors traverse the land of Egypt at the significant places where various aspects of the god were worshipped. That is to say, Heliopolis, where Ra was worshipped, Memphis, where Ptah was worshipped. Okay? Karnak, where Amun was worshipped. Elephantine, where Canaan was worshipped. Where Thoth was worshipped. Hermopolis, where Thoth. So the spirits traverse the land. But do remember one thing, as Dr. Jacob Carruthers said, these 5 different points where different gods are worshipped is the same God. He would worship under different names, but it's the same divinity seen through a different lens, manifesting the same cosmic power and significance. So don't let others tell you that the Egyptians had many gods. No, it was one man dude, and he had others. Now you go to Abydos, where King Seti built the temple of Abydos to Osiris. And in that temple is what is called the Abydos tablet. The Abydos tablet has 76 ancestors, kings, from Menes to Seti first. And further down the corridor of that same portion of the temple is 300 names of gods. These are helpers. Today, 300. Today, if you go to Washington, D.C., so the president is a god in his own right. He got thousands of people. It's just like these are helpers to the principal divinity who sits at the apex of the temple, of the pyramid. Okay? So you gotta know your history, and you have to defend your history, and your history makes you strong in standing up. So that's what Dr. King does August 28th when he goes to Washington, D.C. at the Pyramid of American Park. That's what Charles intends to do when he goes on the 28th of this month to Washington, D.C. And so much more, and so forth. And then the work that Brother River is doing, that is also a significant. So to many people whose names we call out in the beginning, some Temple, all of them, don't forget Dr. Lewis, and everybody who is providing this reservoir, this spigot of knowledge to educate and strengthen your resolve to go to do what you got to do as trees in our forest, okay, with your own branches and creating your own fruit of resistance, fruit of creativity, fruit of knowledge, letting everyone know we can just begin our history with Alex Haley. In the procession, there are standards that are carried before the king, sometimes before the king or after the king. Generally, the king leads the procession. In battle, the king is at the head of his army. In the procession, so I mentioned the procession when the king enters the temple on his way to the sanctuary, the nail, where the nail is and the manifestation of the divinity resides. But the hypostyle hall is also a place where processions occur in celebrating of the ritual, sometimes in celebrating the coronation of the king, or in preparation for a distant voyage to some distant location. For example, the Opet festival occurs at the, okay, my book the book I told you about, on the Temple Blossom that is coming out, it deals essentially with, it deals essentially with the Opeth Festival, okay, which is the principal festival celebrated in Lhasa Temple. So, a procession leaves the sanctuary and walks towards a fork in the road. One portion of the procession goes by foot along the Avenue of Sphinxes towards the Temple of Luxor. And one portion goes to the river and sails down the river to the Temple of Luxor, where it joins another procession from the port or the pier onto the temple. But there's others. So the Feast of the Valley, the procession leaves, of course the procession returns by the same route. Whether the route is by river, they sail down river, they sail up river. Or whether it is by foot along the Avenue of Sphinxes and it returns that. So you have two processions. Now, the Feast of the Valley, where the king goes to the guard goes across the river to the king's temple. The king's temple, the temples of the ancestor kings who are now worshipped because they've gone on. He goes by procession to Luxor Temple, then he crosses over the river in a flotilla, and then they begin another procession, and then they go to the temple of Medina Habu, or the temple of Grand Museum, and then they return, they go across the river again in the 10-year festival, and they come back to Karnak Temple beside the sacred lake, where a temple built by Taharka the Ethiopian welcomes the 10-day festival practitioners where the God is again reborn. So, I mean, it's foot traffic and it's boat traffic. Boat traffic is because in this time, the river is the principal highway. So if you ain't walking, you're sailing. And it's interesting because when we consider the orientation of the Nile River, okay, the Nile flows from south to north. Today, in our reality, we're talking north, south, east, and west. It's not north, south, east, and west. It's south, north, east, and west. Okay? Now, this fellow, Edward Neville in 1890 to 1894 declared Hatshepsut's temple of Giribaru. And then he also cleared from 1903 to 1907, he cleared Mentuhotep's temple right adjacent to that temple. So he's arguing, and he's subscribing to the American Egyptologist James Henry Webster's argument that there was, okay, so Mean sailed with his armada from Abydos, and Dr. Diop says that Means was actually heathen, though he assembled his forces, his armada, at Abydos and sailed north, and conquered the north and united the two countries, forming the Egyptian kingship, but also establishing kingship between of north and south in the double crown. So the white crown represented the south, the red crown represented the north, and he chose the double crown to emphasize a united double crown. So we're told that it's a red and white crown. It's not a red and white crown. It's the white crown resting on the red crown. Again, we're told about north, south, east, and west. It's not about it's south here. So when Neville made a statement, he was corrected by Dr. Diab, because he's looking north and saying that the culture flowed from north to south, and therefore west was on the right-hand side. And Dr. Diab said, no, what the man is doing is he's turning to the south, where he came from, as the Muslim or the Jewish guy would go to where he does his prayer. What the Egyptians, only the other day found out, what the Egyptians did is when he turned south, he said, those people are the black people. Remember, I didn't say black people, the black people. So everybody north of Egypt, in Mediterranean and in Europe, were the black people, the people behind my back, while I'm looking at my God in the south. So when we argue about the origin of the Egyptians, we have to understand where these people came from. Okay? And we have to debunk the myths as they are being presented to us and our young people. But thankfully, as the man said, I'm here. All right. So, what do we, from the pre-dynastic period, that is to say, before Nam, okay, what do we know? Well, we know that, the Africans were not just, they were not sitting around waiting for the white man's warden to arrive, okay? In the slave trade, they had what's called naked imperialism. So the Europeans went in there, grabbed the Africans. You got to read Merrill Williams' book, Capitalism and Slavery. I didn't focus on the British, and that was a part of my thesis. The British in London, Liverpool, and Bristol. Those are the principal slave trading nations, right? So they went in there, grabbed the Africans, brought them to, it was called naked imperialism. So when finally after 1807 the British outlawed the slave trade, they said, well, let's go back to Africa and teach the Africans Christianity. We call it enlightened imperialism. So naked imperialism led to enlightened imperialism. But after 1870, with the excavation of Egypt and the reclamation of Egypt, Jerome Massey calls it the reclamation, reclaiming of Egypt. What ensued was called intellectual imperialism. So we know what military imperialism leading to World War I and all that. But intellectual imperialism meant the collection of artifactual evidence to be deposited in the repositories of the European museums. Okay? When you consider what is abroad, I call it a culture in captivity. Okay? When you consider what's abroad, take for example, Richard Lepsius, early German scholar, visited Egypt and all the way up to Ethiopia and what have you. He collected 15,000 pieces of artifacts and sent them back to Berlin. He used dynamite to open up tombs. Right? This woman, Lorna Oakes, in her book on ancient Egypt, she said that, first thing she said, we write for European audience. So she's not writing for you, I'm writing for you. That's why you got to move. You got to celebrate. You got to help me promote my work. Right? We write for European audience. And then she says that Lepsius made 15,000 squeezes. What is a squeeze? Now I want to make a picture of this guy here, so I get one of these films of paper, and I sort of draw this image onto the paper, and that's a squeeze. He didn't make squeezes. He actually took artifacts back to what became the Berlin collection. Now this is one guy, okay? Imagine the thousands who have been to Egypt and collected stuff and took it abroad until the Egyptians became wise. I know they didn't get wise when they were chipped, but they got wise and said, wait a minute. They said two things. One, they realized that they had some rogue Egyptians who were selling the artifact abroad, but they also realized that we can gain more if the people come to Egypt to see what we got. So because we're going to get hotel, we're going to get hotel staff, we're going to get museums, we're going to get buses to transport visitors back and forth. We can get a substantial return. So they stopped selling stuff. And secondly, they said, wait a minute, you cannot export artifacts unlicensed. Now, if you come in clear this temple or what have you, and you find certain important pieces, we can negotiate your share. You know, like if you have a case with against another company or whatever, and you have a lawyer representing, he gets 30% of whatever the final judgment. So their 30% was a restricted exportation stoppage. Okay. So those two things lets us know that we have to pay attention to these things. Otherwise, they may be stuck under the rug and we lose the memory. Remember now, historic memory. Okay. Next year, Christian nation will celebrate 250 years of American democracy. Great. So what the people are doing today is washing it. You're going to wash it on Ethiopian white? That's what they're doing. And where do we stand? We have to defend our history that happened here. That was in many ways traumatic. That guy down in Alabama, the legal eagle, he was able to identify 4,400 sites, well, not sites, but he was able to identify 4,400 people who were lynched in the South. We go down, I went down there with Brown, he took me over to Alabama, and then we saw the museum and we saw the memorial. And they have these blocks of stone with names of people inscribed according to the various boroughs. How many people, their names that were, you don't forget that? The one thing he did is he built a museum and he built a memorial. So that can't be fun. Now he wanted to establish a marker at every spot, naturally. You remember this guy that was the governor of Texas? I can't remember his name. Perry. Perry, there was, when he ran for president, I could have been 12 or so, I can't remember, on the Republican line. They raised the question because there was a sign on his father's property. And he said, I painted over the sign. Okay, what did the sign say? The sign said, Niggerhead Mountain. That was the name of the place. Now, I reasoned there was no nigger that did anything fantastic that this place can be named after them, except that that's where they lynch people. They lynch Africans, and they named that place after the experiences that they were having. Sometimes I listen to the Black Information Network, the radio station, and this guy, Mr. Mo Kelly, he was commenting on a comment made recently that Hulk Hogan was called a racist, and one of the people in the wrestling establishment said, well, Hulk Hogan was no racist. You know, I know he made some bad choices or whatever. He said, look, if you rape once and you rape 2 times, you're a rapist. If you steal once and steal twice, you're a thief. And if you call black people N-words and you call black people racist, you're racist. So, that name was not a name of honor. It's one of those killing fields where Africa, so the legal wanted to, the number of sites that he was able to identify, he wanted to establish a marker for tourists to say, this is where they kill our people, you know, over there, they had something there. They said no, because someone would have been on his property. These things here, but who's talking about?
9:20 right now.
It's 9:20, so how long you got? How long you know?
I got a few more pages I want to get over.
Oh, man. That's
Okay,
fine.
okay, yeah. So the standards that preceded the king in the procession represented, first of all, the various nomes, or in our modern parlance, like a city-state or whatever, that would combine together to form the United Country. So each one, so like our flags, okay, we got, each state got a flag, sometimes each borough got a flag, and the standards are really instruments, cultural instruments, that represent either a person or a city or whatever. And dating back to the prehistoric, pre-dynastic people, there's a difference between prehistoric and pre-dynastic. Prehistoric means that they weren't recording historical events. They were happening. It was left to later people with the knowledge to reconstruct. But pre-dynastic is before the dynasties. That is to say, in that area, perhaps between 4,200 to 3,100, when, in fact, normal or means established kingship. So on the late pre-dynastic or early dynastic monument, we find the falcon. The falcon was Horus, who was a successor to his father Osiris. A double falcon. Sometimes even the god had his own, his car, or his double, or alter ego, the set animal. Set has always played a role. He was good before he became bad. And the ibis, which was an emblem of Thor. Thor was the god of wisdom and mathematics and music, you name it. And the wolf played a role in disturbing the dead in the cemetery until the Egyptians began to worship him and sort of soften his appetite. And then the royal placenta, which represented the power of the god, of the king. So of these, four seem to be closely related to the king: the falcon, the ibis, the wolf, and the royal placenta. So, in the earliest recognition of the ancestor, the first and most often recognized and discussed issue is that of Nom. He was a conqueror and unifier of Egypt who began the dynastic period, essentially separating from prehistory to history. We know of normal evidence from the normal palette, the normal mason, and from his tomb, B10 in Abydos. His interment there encouraged successive archaic period kings, dynasty 1 and 2, to be buried where their ancestor was buried. So by the time we get to the first and second dynasty, Narmer is an ancestor, and the people chose to be buried where their ancestor was buried. Later, we talk about we talk about Breasted promoting or flaunting the idea of a forced union before now. In the 1960s, this guy did Walter Emery, did some excavations around the pyramids, and he made an argument that the tombs that were buried, that were created around the pyramids, were the tombs of the kings of Egypt, which went to affirm his view that there was a prior union. So the argument became, were the kings buried at Abydos or Mount Saqqara? What turned out to be the end result is that because the king was, we have to understand this notion of duality. So the king was king of Upper and Lower Egypt. He represented two different entities. So he was buried at Abydos. Abydos was where the most sacred spot, the first sacred pilgrimage in Egypt. But because he was a dual king, he created what is called a cenotaph. That was an empty tomb at Memphis, Saqqara. Okay? He had all the trappings, but the body was actually deposited in Abydos, where Osiris, the god of the dead, ruled. Now, I mean, Emery is one of those who promoted the whole notion of the Egyptians being external to Egypt. But think about it. In the mythology, I told you that the body is deposited in the earth in the vicinity, not the king, okay, the king is, in the vicinity where the god of the dead resides, and the spirit goes to heaven. Right? Now, if the god of the dead is in Abydos, why would the king choose to be buried at a distant location in the north at Memphis, Saqqara? So that idea was shot down, but not too many. Okay, a lot of the books that Dr. Ben often said, okay, so Dr. Ben and I go back a long way, right? I was one of his early followers, and he said to me, he said, Monderson, there are 50 countries in Africa. Choose one to become a specialist rather than be a general. So I chose Egypt, a stand on He said, get the earliest documents you can find and work from there. And the third thing he said, now that you've come to Egypt and you've seen all the knowledge, what are you going to do with it? Well, he also said, publish or perish. So what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of, I'm working on all the knowledge that I found. I'm publishing or perish. But I also trying to get all the old information. So much of the new books, either they gloss over the true historical knowledge, the historic memory, or they don't include the old thing. My area of specialty is 1870 to 1930. That's when all the archaeological, well, 98% of all archaeological excavation was done in this time period. What we have today is the museums full of stuff where people are not doing archaeology in the museum. They're going through all the boxes. Now remember, George Reasoner, coming out of the University of Carrot, I told you that Lepsis Carrot shipped 15,000 pieces of artifacts to Egypt, to Berlin. Reasoner shipped 400 boxes to the University of California. All right? Now, we don't know what's in those boxes. So when you go, okay, take for example the New York Public Library on 42nd Street. I think they got 12 stories of books going on into New York. So when we hear about these museums, we don't know what they got in there. Okay? We don't know what they got in there. So what we got to do, what I learned, I told you about the 5-word letter that Asante wrote. He said, when I was in 92, when I was at the temple, we talked about the invasion of Somalia to find General Adid. I said, don't go, let the organization help you. So I wrote this letter, which became, I probably showed it to you guys here before, because it became the manifesto for that, right? He said, Monderson, well done, Lafi Asantis. He sent me this 5-letter word where I established the Afrocentric response to the invasion of Somalia to find General Adid. Okay? 2 years or 3 years ago, I can't remember, getting old, I was going to Egypt. So I think it's right after the pandemic. So I went to the Egyptian Museum in Manhattan, and they have this new requirement that you gotta go online and then join the line. So I said, well, look, there's something called visa on arrival. So I said, what I think the visa notion, the idea is that the host country collects some foreign reserves, right? So you pay $25 and you get a visa to Istanbul. But when I was leaving the United, passing through by the line, I saw these Africans over there. Nova was among these people. I said, oh, what are these Africans doing over there? So I went over there to see what they're doing in front of the United Nations. And they were establishing, you may be familiar with this. Recently, this guy sent me an email. This general, I think Burkina Faso, or one of those West African countries, and he's a young guy. He's making statements saying that Africans should come back home. So I went over to the UN and saw these Africans there. And I became a founding member of the Diaspora Declaration, which is a start welcoming Africans to return to Africa. And then I wrote the declaration, and Sheikh Musa tells me that it was published in 3 of the West African French language newspapers. Okay, so this whole idea of the return. Remember now, I was a member of the Bonds Committee. I was the chairman of the Bonds Committee. My sister Cherise was a member of the Bonds Committee. When we strategized with Sonny Carson to return the bones of the runaway Samuel Carson back to Africa, back to Ghana, that created the door of return. Then, like my mother and my grandmother and my family, as members of the cadre fighting for the liberation of Africa. Because that and $2.90 to get me at the bus in New York City. What I do when I got here. I'm so good. Okay. Now.
A couple more minutes, let's roll.
Okay. Well, in that sense, I said most of what I wanted to say. I needed to talk about it. Let me just, I wanted to make my conclusion. Yeah, okay. So, in many respects, the ancestors play a significant role in the life of normal people throughout Africa, but especially in ancient Egypt. From Nahum to the last pharaohs, the ancestor idea was manifest in the royal cow. The royal cow was that essence that linked the beginning to the end of kingship in that country. And that is what we celebrate, because in celebrating that, we celebrate the ancestors, we remember the ancestors, and that strengthens us in our resolve to go forward and praise and defend our people. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, give Monderson a very big hand. All right, Zoom audience, do you have any questions for the doctor? Zoom audience, do you have any questions for the doctor? Any questions for Doc? Going once? Going twice? Going 3 times, no questions for the doc, give him a great big hand. Now, anybody from the floor? Does anybody from the floor have any questions for Dr. Fred Monderson? All right, Brother Ray wants to give Dr. Monderson a great big hand. Remember, his books is going to be available on Amazon. Ain't nobody banning no books. You can buy them, 3 thrift books. Everybody's selling books. So don't go for that nonsense about they banning anything. They ain't banning nothing.
I'm going to be at the Brooklyn Book Festival on the 22nd of September. Okay? I got a booth there. I was one of the earliest members. They're celebrating 20 years. Believe me, they began with about 10 tents. Today, they got nearly over 500 tents. So the book business, New York is the capital of the book world. But people are reading. Don't be left out. And if you follow me, become a Monderson reader, then you're going to get the real deal. I do the research, I check everything that I print, and I'm educating my people. Okay? This book is a unique specimen. It needs to be on your shelf. It's a one of a kind. Okay? It tells you about the Temple of Luxor. There are 5 principal temples in Luxor, Egypt. Temple of Luxor, this book. Temple of Karnak, I have that book. Temple of Dirabari, I have that. And I'm about to promote 2 more. Medinet Habu and Ramuzia. So the 5 principal books of Luxor Temple, I have a copy of each one. The 5 principal temples, I have a copy of a book relating to that. That is a kind of a guidebook where you can take it into the temple. And what I'm showing you is what you want to see.
Okay.
More knowledgeable.
So next, Dr. Arthur Lewis will be back for part 14. He's going to cover the whole region of Africa, the Sahara region and everything. I want to thank the Zoom audience for coming out. I want to thank the members that came out in the rain. Give yourself a great big hand in honor. Remember, if you can stop by Restoration, but in honor of the live lectures and just coming out to see everybody is good, you know, but still we want to keep this going because at the rate, if George Soros gets his way, New York is already done with what's going on. There's a lot of plans coming in, and we better wake up and find out what's happening because the things is going to start happening. So give Monderson a great big hand.